Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of this season of History for Gays. After the reception of the first episode, I realized I didn't even say the name of the episode. Well, this episode is Catalyst for Nationalism, Independence Movement, and Nationalist Organizations. In case you're new or are a returning listener and forgot my name, hi, my name is Victoria, and I love history. We are in fact continuing our explanation that the last episode started. Of course, I'm referencing this season's topic of the independence movements of Western Africa, paying closer attention to the country Ivory Coast. So without further ado, put on your exploring shoes and let's take it back. We are going to begin our scope out a little bit, focusing on French West Africa as a whole. Mandated powers were assigned territories with the end goal of having self-determination and self-rule. This colonial empire was renamed the French Union in 1946, granting this colonies a small level of self-rule and could elect some representatives for the French Assembly. Well, isn't that just so kind and respectful of France? Of course, I'm saying this sarcastically, as these territories were still very much under French rule, even if the goal was for France to eventually leave a prosperous Ivory Coast alone. After all, that is the whole point of a mandated power. The Great Depression caused economies to suffer in Europe. To combat this, governments thought to place their resources onto the colonies. The colonies would produce raw materials a lot more efficiently, and the colonies would become a lot wealthier with their resources being bought. Well, Europe thought wrong. By placing the resources onto the colonies, they were just creating the raw materials and not fully creating the finished results, which would have to be exported back and made into more developed materials. Europe colonized Africa because they thought they could develop a civilization there better than the one that already existed. However, with World War I, Europeans began to have moral doubts, and World War II brought forth a lot of change with decolonization, i.e. Japan and Germany. People began questioning whether or not colonies were necessary, especially with their recovering economies after the wars. States were inspired by the War for Independence in Algeria. De Gaulle, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, leader of the French Republic, had a referendum in which the territories in the French Union could have internal control over government or complete independence. This was in September of 1958. Only Guinea voted for independence, as the independent nation would lose all French support. Basically, this means that if the state left the French Republic, then France would no longer give the newly independent state any support, and I mean no support. Mostly the support in context was economic support. When Guinea left, they were on the verge of an economic collapse. However, Ghana supported the state, as they were also a newly independent country. Ghana, now free from Britain, propped Guinea up while they were a freshly born country, which is, to me, very sweet, because, I don't know, it's like 2G countries, oh my god, they're besties. Though, one of the issues with creating an independent nation was that of allies. In the process of becoming independent, it was recommended to have allies that were outside of Africa so that they could help with the internal conflicts. This was difficult, though, as it was the beginning of the Cold War and most countries were divided by the Communist East and Capitalist West. So there were organizations that helped. Not necessarily in place of allies, but more like extra support. Okay, so here I'm about to say the name of the French president at the time, but I don't know French, so pardon my pronunciation. But Felix Houphouët-Boigny of Ivory Coast was the president of the RDA and helped pass the Loi Cadre in 1956. The RDA stands for the African Democratic Assembly. The actual name is French, but as I don't speak French, as I already mentioned, I don't want to butcher the name. The Loi Cadre, also known as the Reform Act, gave a lot of self-government to the African territories. While this autonomy sounds great, there was still a lot of dependence on France to approve of decisions. But I digress. Other leaders like Leopold Senghor of Senegal and Sekou Touré of Guinea thought this law would cause the borders of states to be too small, enabling dependence on France. So not many people were totally fans of the Loi Cadre. As the group was comprised of different political parties from different territories, it did not exactly have a centralized platform. Needless to say, the group likely had left-wing beliefs, as democratic was in the name. Of course, democratic meaning for the people, by the people, not necessarily democratic as in Democratic Party in America as we see it. Needless to say, these nations wanted autonomy to hold their own fair and democratic government for the people, not under France. And the goal of the RDA was to create equal opportunity for all Africans. Even though it did not necessarily want France to just up and leave the colonies, it did endorse Pan-Africanism and anti-colonial viewpoints. The reason they didn't want France to totally leave is because they would have no support. They would have collapsing economies with no allies to trade with necessarily. Well, I do believe I just covered a lot of information. I think I need a nap, to be frank. So the question of the day is this. Why do you think that mandated countries seek independence when they have the benefits from the mandated power? Think about that. This has been your host, Victoria, and it's time to take off your exploring shoes now, folks.